All right, I think we're live.
Yeah.
Hello. It feels so lonely without Alan here. There's only two of us on the stream. There's no extra little bubble here. I'm missing it. It's weird. It's just two of us.
Yeah.
Ugh. Do you wanna get into it?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I
yeah, well let's definitely get into it.
I only said because I'm actually really excited for today's episode. So, hey
Good.
everybody, welcome to Off
Same
Watch
here
This podcast.
actually.
Yeah, me too. So let me do intro. Hey everybody, welcome to Off Watch This podcast. I'm Devon.
And I'm Brian.
And I'm
Yeah.
Devin. I can't not do this in threes. It doesn't make any sense for me not to. Today, we are taking a trip back to the past. This was actually Ryan's idea, and I absolutely love it. We're taking a trip back to the past to just weird childhood movies, man. Ryan, I'm not sure if you saw the thumbnail that I pulled for YouTube for this one. I'm especially proud of it. But today, Ryan and
Yeah,
I,
yeah, I did.
good. Ryan and I have curated our two favorite what the childhood movies, and we're going to talk about them. But before we do that, we usually spend this portion of the show talking about what we watched in pop culture this week. Ryan, did you watch anything in pop culture this week?
To be honest, no. And what I have been watching is like 30 years old. Actually, yeah, 30 years old of like an old school pop culture thing that I've been watching. I've been rewatching Sequest all the way through
No,
for the
does it hold
first
up?
time in like 20 some years. For me, the stories do. The really, really cheap CGI graphics are don't really hold up well
Well, okay,
at
so
all.
do you remember when they switched from like SD to HD TV and all of a sudden like some TV shows and like news anchors and everything, you're like, oh, this wasn't meant for high def. I think
Yeah.
that happened to a lot of those old shows. I think a lot of camera tricks and stuff that were like used back then definitely didn't hold over the Switch, so maybe that might be why.
Well, partly. Some of the stuff you can tell that like for a science fiction TV show for like 1994, 1995, it definitely has a look of like mid 90s low budget CGI for some things.
Sure.
Like it's just like you can't get around it when it
Yeah.
comes to that and quality. So there's that. But season one is fine. Like they do a lot of more practical effects in season one. A lot of the CGI shots of the submarine and of like the little shuttles and stuff, like it's in water, so like they can blur it out, and make
Oh,
it,
sure.
like clear up the rough a little bit, so like it doesn't look that bad. It's when you get into season two, you can tell that the studio was like, look, we need to make this more science fiction and we need to like up our game a little bit, but then there are other things that kind of like fell on the wayside, and I can definitely see why Sequest only has like one good season, and season two is like I can see what they're trying to do, but it's not horrible. And then season three is like, oh my God, what were you people thinking? Just let the thing die. Like,
What
just
is that why you enjoy watching it? Like it's almost a Schadenfreude of like the season 3 downward spiral.
yeah, no, I mean it is that and I forget the actor's name, but the sheriff from Jaws.
Oh
Like
yeah.
he's the original captain in seasons one and two, and I really like him. And then season three, the actor, that actor who I mentioned before, he was like, okay, this is getting too ridiculous for me. Like, I like acting. I like the original idea of what Sequest was supposed to be. This isn't what I signed on for. This is taking a turn that I don't want to like deal with. And they're like, okay, we'll bring in Michael Ironside then. And bring in Michael Ironside to be the captain of the Sequest. And it's a choice. I like the choice. All of the characters that they have developed around the other actor and the other character make more sense around him. And
Sure.
then Michael Ironside comes in as like an actual like military like captain, and instead of like some guy who's interested in purely science. And it just like the first couple episodes I'm just like, oh, that's what they're doing, okay. I remember this as a kid, and I remember why this was entertaining, but I'm not liking this as an adult, and I'm actually like interested in the relationships between these characters. So,
That makes sense then.
but definitely recommend that if anyone even faintly remembers watching Sequest as a kid,
I
or
do.
like even kind of liking it, at least revisit the first season
Okay. I'm gonna have to.
because that holds up. Like the first Sequest really holds up.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that then. Uh, okay, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on what I watched this week, but it's my ultimate guilty pleasure show. I bring it up every time a new season drops. Ryan, what is the show?
I Naked Love.
So
Naked,
close, so
Naked Love
which by the
fan.
way, by the way, is a show here, and they are really naked, and it's too much. I think I talked about it on the podcast. It's still too much for me. I'm too much of a prude. It's it's Love Is Blind. The
Oh,
new
Love Is Blind.
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
new
Okay.
season dropped. It takes place in DC, and I feel like they grabbed the only group of people who don't work for some kind of like senator, because typically in DC, I heard in the dating pool, it's always, well, who do you work for? But all of these people are like art collectors, and it gives me all of the stuff I love about Love Is Blind is back in full force. These are all garbage people. These are all emotionally
Yeah.
immature individuals that don't know how to handle anything and are now suddenly be asked to make the biggest decisions of their lives in a week's time span. My favorite thing that it does, and they've done this before on Love Is Blind, and if you ever wanted to get a masterclass in creative editing, watch this season of Love Is Blind, because in the first 3 episodes they follow this couple, right? These two people that like the guy's personality is, I'm rich, and the woman's personality is, people like me, and that's it. Like, they're not any deeper than that. And they get together, they do the whole like, oh, I choose you, I'm going to propose, and
Yeah.
it's awkward, and they drop them. But these two people are on the entire show, but they cut around them. So they're cut out of group shots. Where they're sitting is cut out of a chair. If they're on a long couch with each other, they'll edit it so you only see the part of the couch that they're not on. Like, they're there the whole time, and people talk to and about them, but the whole show cuts around these two people. It's incredible.
Interesting. You know what though? Like even though they are only that deep, at the same time, that sounds like a perfect match.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, the one half of them, the woman was like, I don't think that I want to do anything. I think that I should be well provided for. And like, that's a perfectly fine opinion. It's not one that I would ever imagine me having. But the guy was just like, yeah, it's all right. I have the money for it. And like, his whole big thing was, he's like, I'm afraid that people just like my money and not me. And I'm like, wish I had that problem, man.
Yeah, like I mean, that's how, what was it? I saw a video of something like that, or it was like there were like these two girls that were asking him questions, and the one was talking about how her like boyfriend makes like a certain amount of money a year,
Mm-hmm.
and then the one turns to her and go, "That's how much he makes? He needs to make more. Any guy that I'm, like gonna be with needs to make at least 200K
Yeah.
like a year." And people in the comments were completely roasting the girl that had that opinion, and I'm just sitting there going like, if that's the life she wants and that's what she's aiming for, by all means, I wish her
I mean,
like,
yeah, inevitably she'll find somebody. I mean, there are those people out there.
yeah,
I mean, when I was in LA, I knew people that their limit, like, they had a financial bottom to who they would date. Like, you had to be earning this much or above to afford the kind of
yeah,
lifestyle that they wanted to live. And that's just how people are. I mean, not me. Clearly not me. I'm not.
yeah.
Anyway, yes, Love Is Blind. It's fun. It's gross. It's everything that I want from the show. That's really all I've been watching this week. I think I watched 7 hours of Love Is Blind this week. I don't want to talk about it, even though I always do. But I'm more excited to get into the meat of our show because this is the part
Okay.
that I have been literally since you pitched it to me. You pitched this to me about 2 weeks ago. I went into the other room and told Romana, I am so excited for this show. This is exactly what I want to talk about. So instead of stealing your thunder, Ryan, I want you to explain it.
Okay, so I saw I saw a reel on Instagram like 2 or 3 months ago of and you know what? I would totally plug in the creator, but like I saw it and then like my thing refreshed and I couldn't find it again. So I really feel bad about that. But anyway, she was going on about how like there are movies that we watched as kids that are pretty much just like nightmare fuel. Like when
Mm-hmm.
we were watching them as a kids, we didn't realize it. They were just like, really good action or like suspenseful like kids movies. But then as you get older and you're watching it, you're like, how did I not have nightmares from this? Like
Yes.
how did I, like not end up being, like scarred for life from this character or from this scene. And then you think back to it and you're like, hang on a second, I think I am scarred for life already. I'm just realizing that now.
You're like this.
Like
This
moments like
explains
that.
everything.
It, yeah. So I wanted to kind of take that idea and be like, hey, let's do something like that. Devin, you know, you pick one movie that you would consider to be in that vein, and I'll pick one movie that's in that vein. And then we can also make up, like a list of like 5 to 4 runners up that we think that would also fit in that vein from our childhood.
Yeah.
And we'll just talk about them with using our two main picks as like the focal point of like explaining this. And that's what I told Devin. And I saw his eyes as soon as I said it, and I was like, "Yes, we're gonna do it." And I was,
Yeah. Yeah, well cuz me like I have this running list of movies that I'm just like I why did I watch this? What were these? So this is like everything I want to talk about. So
Mhm.
why don't since you were the one that decided the topic of the show, why don't you go ahead
Okay,
and we'll talk about your movie first?
okay. So my movie I picked was Little Monsters. It is a live action kids movie from 1989. It was directed by Richard Greenberg, and it starred Fred Savage, Howie Mandel, Daniel Stern is in it, and a few other people. But it's basically the story of a kid whose family's falling apart. Like they recently moved, the parents are fighting. Um, his first day at school, he meets the bully. So like his life isn't going well for your typical like 11-year-old or like 12 or 13-year-old. Um, and turns out that under the bed of the little brother's room is a port of the monster world. So pretty much think of Monsters Inc. Instead of being in the closet, it's under the bed.
Which
And
makes sense.
these portals just let them, yeah, which the monsters come up and they cause mischief. They get the kids in trouble for like ruining stuff around the house. And of course the parents are like, well, who else would have done this? We were asleep. You're the only one else in the house. And so like they'd get in trouble, and that's the core of the movie. The suspense or storyline comes in where monsters pick Fred Savage's little brother to stay down there for too long to become a new monster for under the bed, and it's him and his friends that he makes to go down and rescue his brother. Um, this movie was on rotation for me uh ever since I can remember. Like I have very very few memories of actually sitting in the living room house in Alton, so before the age of 8, watching certain movies. This is one of them. I remember sitting down playing a micro machines and watching this movie
That was a good sentence.
constantly. So
Oh man.
yeah, and rewatching it is a trip. But before I get to that, Devin, what's your history with this? Like, did you even know about it? Like,
I didn't know this was a movie until you told me about it. I've never heard of this. I don't think I've even seen clips of this anywhere. This is like completely wiped off the face of the world as far as movies is concerned for me. In fact, I had to rent
Yeah.
it on Amazon and it was only available in standard definition. It didn't even get high resed over here to high def.
If it
Incredible.
makes you if it makes you feel any better, I believe that's the same way that I watched it.
Yes, good. Good, good, good. Uh, so, I mean, okay, you're going to have to answer a question for me because you know more about this movie.
Okay.
Which came out first, this or Beetlejuice?
I believe it was Beetlejuice.
You know what? I feel like it almost has to be because it feels like in some scenes Howie Mandel is channeling Beetlejuice. And he does a really good job.
Yeah.
Did you find the date?
Yeah. Beetlejuice 1988. Yeah, so it came out a year before. So they were probably like filming.
Right around the same time.
Yeah, they were probably either like they had to have known about Beetlejuice when they were filming this. They
Yeah.
had to have. But yeah, no, that's where I actually came across something that mentioned that like you had Beetlejuice and then you had Little Monsters where the where was it Michael Douglas? Not Michael Douglas. Howie Mandel.
Oh, yeah.
Where Howie is like channeling more of like a kid-friendly Beetlejuice
Yes.
in a way. Um which also gets into what's considered child-friendly in 1989 compared to what's friendly in 2024, because we definitely need to talk about
There were
that.
some scenes in this, man. Holy shit.
So, yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a correlation there where like critics, like professional critics pointed that out when this movie came out.
Oh, did they?
And it
Okay.
was like, hey, it's like a child-friendly, it's like a, it's like, was it Maurice?
Yeah, Maurice.
That that like Maurice is just basically like a child-friendly version of Beetlejuice.
I see it, though. I absolutely see it.
Oh yeah. So
What did you like about this as a kid? What part of this like drew you in?
just the silliness of it. It was the like even though I was probably like around between like 6 and 7 when watching this movie. It was the fact that it was like it was a kid. Uh, the kid kind of like living in his own world because adults are kind of oblivious to what's going on. Because I can definitely tell you that like in the movie, the bully is picking on Fred Savage and like being a jerk, and all the bus driver cares about is that he's not sitting down. Like he doesn't
Yep.
tell the bully to stop being a bully. They're just like, sit down. And the kid sits down, and it's like, okay, great. So the adult's not going to do anything about this. I definitely have memories of that, even when I was that young. So there's that connection, most likely. But I like the character. I like the silliness. I loved the humor in it, the physical humor, and that might be why I'm more of a physical humor person.
That's fair.
Is because of this movie. Um, and the whole like I don't know, like the magic aspect of it, of like the portals being under the bed, and like the way that whole thing worked. Um, it also kind of reads as one giant "Are You Afraid of the Dark" episode,
Yes.
which I like as well.
You prepared me for that. You said this is a long Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, and you're right.
Yeah. Um. So yeah. So from as much as I can remember from being like a 7-year-old, that's what I believe that I liked about it then. Um, do you think you would have enjoyed this as a kid, or would have this been something you would have been like, this is too silly?
All right. So, real talk. As a kid, I was a very sensitive little flower. I could not hear, and this is real, I could not hear the sound of another human being burping without sympathy gagging or vomiting. That was just how I was. So I would have gotten to at least a particular scene, if not several other scenes, and would have genuinely been so nauseous I had to leave the room. Now, I've since gotten over that. You can go ahead and burp around me all you want, it doesn't matter. But like
Yeah.
I had zero tolerance for like body function humor at all until like the age of like 16. So
I
no,
could
I
definitely
wouldn't.
see where that would be a problem in
Yeah,
this.
would not have liked this movie. No, definitely not.
Okay. Okay. Um, how does adult Devon feel about it? And
Oh, I
then I'll
love it.
give, and then I'll deep dive into mine.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I like it.
Yeah.
It's this really like like as an adult, right? I like a lot of what it's doing and what it's going for. I like the work that Howie Mandel's putting into the character and the little touches that he does. And I like how creative it was. Like in a world before Monsters Inc., they have a monster
Yeah.
area. They give the monsters a whole society and a whole like kind of rank and structure. And you know, sure, it kind of meanders. There's not a lot of like a driving plot until the little brother gets kidnapped, but like fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does what a movie like this should do, right? It sets up his premise, it explores the premise well, and then it pays it off at the end. And I like how they solve it in the end too. I thought that was really clever. Like I had a stupid moment when watching the movie where they're like, "We're stuck," and I'm like, "They are stuck." And then we'll talk about how they solve it later. But I'm like, "Yeah, why didn't I think of that?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Stupid.
Um, yeah, that's kind of my experience. Like, I turned on this movie expecting it to be just dumb. I was expecting it to be just like, like, oh, this is just going to be a bunch of humor that I kind of vaguely remember, and there's not going to be really anything really deep to it. And then you had the scenes of the parents fighting, and like the little
Yeah.
thing said between the parents that only like an adult would get and not like a kid. And I'm going, oh, this is actually kind of heavy. Like, I would really hate to be a parent who's going through a relationship issue in, like, let's say 1991,
Mm-hmm.
and your kid's like, "Mom, Dad, I want to go see this movie." It'd be like, you go to Blockbuster, and the kid's like, "I want to get, oh, look, it's Fred Savage. I want to get this movie." You're like, "Oh, okay, looks it's a kid monster movie." And then you take it home, and then you're watching the movie, and you're sitting there with your wife or husband or partner, and you're just kind of like, "Well, that's too close to home." And
You start crying halfway through. I get it now. I should be here when I'm here.
yeah. So I appreciated that aspect to it. And even just like the stuff that was going on with the kids, and like you don't, or as far as I can remember, there weren't a lot of movies that had like a that had like, or it didn't feel like anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that you had a lot of movies that threw a kid into something that had this high of stakes with something that was live action.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also talking about strictly on the media that I consumed as a kid. I'm sure there's other movies out there that like someone's going to go, well, "What about this movie? This kid had to rescue his whole family." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll give you that." But from everything that I watched as a kid, this was, to like 1993 to when I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I could like, watch it till the cows came home because my parents didn't care. I hadn't seen anything that put a kid in my age group
Yeah.
at that time into something this serious. That was a live action movie. So, um, looking back on it, I definitely appreciated that aspect of it. But everything you said about like there was an actual,
Yeah.
like the story actually like carried itself forward. Um, I want to get to where this movie is a very like really shows the difference between what was kid appropriate in 1989 and what is considered kid appropriate in
I
2024,
have
and
two
how we
scenes.
got here.
I don't know how we got here, but I have two
Yeah,
scenes
and
in
like,
particular that I was like, what is this?
okay, so you bring them up because I was waiting to hear
Scene number
to know
one
this.
was the refrigerator scene where he dumps out the bully's apple juice. pees in the apple juice, and then the next day you watch the bully drink the pee. Uh, that like I told you, I had like a gagging problem as an adult or as a kid. That scene made me
Yeah.
gag as an adult. Like I don't, and also how quickly the little kid identified pee. He's drank pee before. You know
Yeah.
he's drank pee before. This isn't his first rodeo. The other scene was the one of the scenes where you first are kind of introduced to the boy and his guardian monster, and they just
Hmm.
twist a head off a kid, put it or a monster that looks like a kid, put it on a little basket, send it up, and plop a new head on. And I was
Yeah.
very very shocked that that was happening in this children's movie. That, as we can see from the poster down there, PG.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
And
is
this is where, yeah, and this is where the whole like nightmare fuel comes into play because like I
mm-hmm.
remember watching this as a kid and saying, "Oh, look, it's a goofy monster world. They can do stuff like this." And it never crossed my mind how like disturbing that actually is. Like he just took the head off a kid and put it in the basket. The basket goes away and like a random head from somewhere else gets put onto that. And then the body goes off walking away. Um,
As you do.
but yeah, the the uh, the scene with the apple juice was something that I almost forgot about. Like I remember watching it, going, "They're not actually doing this," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right, they did." And the bully's going to say someone put piss in my apple
Yep.
juices at lunch. Um, that and like the language, the language that's in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
the that uh, that kind of humor, the fact that they allude to Fred Savage's character like having a crush on like his classmate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Granted, I don't have kids. I don't see what, like the, made for TV movies are showing now, but I feel like a lot more parents today would have problems with this movie compared to what they did in 1989. And I had this thought a few weeks ago where it's like I would have thought that the generation that had classmates being pulled out of class because they were reading Harry Potter would have grown up to be a little bit more, I don't know, like not as icky
Like
about
understanding.
things that, yeah, to be a little bit more understanding than I may have turned out to be. I'm a little surprised when I hear like hardcore, like old school parent, like opinions. Like I'm hearing parenting opinions from people my age
Mm-hmm.
that I remember as a kid hearing from like friends who had really strict parents
Mm-hmm.
and hearing from them what their parents have said, and I'm just like, I thought we were gonna end stuff like this, like realizing that like that really doesn't matter. Just let the kid be a kid and enjoy the goofy stuff.
Oh,
But
Ryan, I've had this. I've had this thing. I've had the exact realization a couple of days ago, and if Alan were on here, he would be mad at me for only realizing it not too long ago. Where I'm like, I turned out like my dad, and like when I was a kid, I'm like, I'm never gonna be that. I'm gonna be my own man, and like no matter what happened, I just turned out like my dad. And I don't know if you've had that, but boy, did I have that.
I there are some there are some things. There are some mannerisms I've realized that I tend to laugh like my dad a little bit.
Oh,
There are certain, like things that I do, like mannerisms and like personality quirks that I've realized that are similar to my dad, but from a very young age, and I feel like this is why I kind of turned out different. I got sick and tired by the time I was 13 of being told that like my TV shows suck, my music suck, the movies I like are horrible. From, like distant family members to, like teachers who had us have to, like I remember in middle school we had to write a paper for English that had to write a paper for English on why music has gotten worse over time.
Who is this person? Who made you do this?
It was East Hills Middle School. I
That's
forget the teacher's
every
name.
generation has that conversation.
I know, and you can go back in history and see that. So, I've made it a point that growing up, that well, I made it a point when I was 13, when I was still in middle school. I was like, it's like looking back, hearing stuff that my dad would say that, my grandfather said to him when he was growing up, and, understanding that that's a cultural thing, that's not like an individual thing, like that happens, to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I was ambitious. My first goal was that I am always going to stay up with music. I am always going to keep up with entertainment. I'm always going to know who's who and what's what. That has failed. I have not been able to hold myself accountable. What I have determined myself to do, and one of the reasons why I roll my eyes whenever I see Gen X, millennials, and now Gen Z starting to talk crap on the generation below of when it comes to entertainment, is like, even if I don't get it, it doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
It makes sense to them, it doesn't make sense to me, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it sucks.
Like what you like,
because when like when Gen Z gets older and when Gen Alpha gets older, their kids' generations are going to, try to find something that's different for them, that's different than their parents. And then Gen Z and Gen Alpha is going to be looking back and going, oh, our music was so much better. Music has only gotten worse throughout the years. And it's like, no, it's just during your formative years, you latch on to the music that was around in your youth, and that's why you get nostalgic when you hear certain stuff or for certain bands.
Yeah.
And that's where that is. And honestly, that's where these movies are for me.
Yeah.
Like, I would never tell anyone you have to watch Little Monsters, it's a masterpiece. No, I only like this movie because I liked it when I was 7, and it reminds me of a time when I literally had nothing to worry about except for, accidentally hitting one of the buttons on my Micro Machine military base and flinging a tank halfway across the room by accident.
Yeah.
The only thing I was ever worried about.
Yeah. It was a good time. It was, and a lot about this movie very much takes place in that time period too. Like, you get the Polaroid camera, you get like just a lot of like very good, very like of its era technology and like just things in it. I love it. I love it. Do you have anything else for Little Monsters before we move on to my pick for this?
I want to get to what you want to talk about when it comes to at the end, because this movie's more than 30 years old, so let's just say it. So they rescue his little brother from the boy, which is the monster that runs this monster universe.
Horrific.
Who is terrifying.
Horrific.
By the way.
Genuinely
he's
horrific.
Literally wearing like
boy costume.
Like the boy, his costume is a monster wearing a human skin suit, and the face gets ripped off. Like, he's literally wearing the skin of a dead individual.
Yeah, I don't love it.
The face comes off, and it's kind of scary. They don't get back to, was it Boston? It's outside of Boston that they moved to. Like, the floor is filled up and they can't get out. And it's like, oh crap, we're lost. The brother, we're all going to turn into monsters. And then someone goes, but the sun's not up in Chicago yet. And so they run to, like in the Monsterverse of Chicago. They don't make it to Chicago. They try like Reno or Las Vegas or something, and that doesn't work. And they wind up crawling up underneath a cot that a homeless man is sleeping on the LA beach.
Yep.
To make it back to make it back in time.
The answer is time zones. That's all it is. Like, how do you solve this problem? Time zones. I thought that was so clever, and it was one of those things where I'm just like, yeah.
It was intelligent.
It was like, of course it was. And like, stupid me was like, I guess they're trapped. Like, maybe they'll just be monsters, and that's how it ends. Because the whole time I was like, oh, Fred Savage is going to become a monster. That's where this whole thing's leading. And, it's going to be, nope, time zones. I loved it. I loved it.
So, I really want to get to your pick.
Good.
I really, really do.
All right. So my pick, give me a second to change the graphic. One sec. There it is. My pick is the 1994 Don Bluth classic, A Troll in Central Park, starring or directed by John Bluth and Gary Goldman, starring Dom DeLuise, Cloris Leachman, and Charles Nielsen Riley. This movie is, you gave a bit of introduction to yours, I'll do mine. It is the tale of a troll that grows flowers with his magical green thumb, he starts out locked in a jail cell because the troll queen does not like flowers. She hates them, so he gets exiled to Central Park. And a little girl and a little boy essentially run into him in Central Park, and all kinds of mischief ensues. It is a svelte 76 minutes, this thing, and I don't know how you make it even a second longer than what it is. I look. This made my list of these kind of weird childhood movies specifically because of a lot of the scenes of like the troll village, and the queen. I believe she is called. Where is she? Norga. Norga and Lord.
Norga or something like that.
Norga.
Yeah.
They specifically because a lot of her scenes and what her power does. I just remember some really brief flashes of this movie making me nauseous as a kid. It didn't as much anymore, but it did when I was a kid. And yeah, it was just as weird as I thought it was. Ryan, what's your history with this movie?
So this is actually one of Kristen's favorite movies from when she was a kid.
I love it so much.
So this is probably only the second time I've watched it all the way through.
Okay.
I have watched the first like 45 minutes of this like probably like 10 times because this used to be a movie that Kristen would put on to like, fall asleep.
Oh yeah.
And so like I would see it. So like the first half of this movie I know pretty well.
Say 45 is literally half of this movie.
Yeah. But I had no idea that this movie even existed until I met Kristen, and like she brought it up the one time. This this movie, Thumbelina, Pebble and the Penguin, and We're Back at Dinosaur Story.
Yes.
are like her favorite films from her childhood, and I like it. It's entertaining. It's goofy and funny and very much of its time, and I like it.
So it does this thing, right, where and I don't know if you caught on to this at all in terms of the animation style of it, but it does something that I think just makes it a little bit off-putting for me, where it's not that it's rotoscoped. Like, it's certainly not like a Bakshi movie, but it's a little bit like some of their movements are a little bit off or a little bit like too realistic for what they're showing. A good example is like when the flowers were dancing, right? A lot of them were moving in very human ways that it just looked like they like saw somebody dance and just drew a flower over top of their exact movements. And like it hits this weird uncanny valley for me a lot. Am I crazy? Did you have that?
I'm so happy you said that because Kristen was like, "Oh, you've got to watch this. I'm going to watch it with you."
Yeah!
So like we planned to like watch it together. And so and I explained this whole thing to my wife, and she was like, "Okay, that's weird, but whatever." And so we were watching it, and about like halfway through, I'm like, I really want to try to guess what is something in this movie that Devon wanted, like had this movie like fit in this category.
Yeah.
And one was like the like evil troll stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's
like,
exactly
just the hardness of the of the animation and the kind and like the rawness to it. I was like, okay, that makes sense because that's kind of like Secret of Nim with like the rats. Like it's very, like it's very harsh. It's a very harsh animation style. And we got like the flowers, and were like dancing and they were doing
Hmm.
their stuff, or like, or I mean, like even at the beginning where like the flowers are in his home and he's like talking to them and
Yeah.
they're like following him around, and like I laughed a little bit and I turned to my wife and I said, I bet it's the flowers. I bet it has to do with the flowers. Something with the flowers is what triggered him for this movie to be like it's like, oh,
Nightmare
this
Fuel.
definitely should have been nightmare fuel. Um, and I'm happy to know that
You're
I
not
was
wrong.
right.
You're not wrong. It's the animation on the flowers that are almost way too human. It makes it look a little bit weird for me. Exactly right.
Okay.
It's a style though. So I think almost all of the movies that you mentioned have this same kind of animation style. It's a 20th Century Fox thing. I think where like their
Yeah.
approach to animation isn't the same that you would see at Disney. And I think it's that difference that makes it a little bit odd to watch for me.
Well, that and it's that animator, the guy that did this movie.
Yeah.
He also did American Tail. We're Back
He
at Dinosaur
yeah,
Story.
yeah.
Like like almost all of the 20th Century Fox movies that were animated from, that time period were his.
Yeah.
And I feel like besides outside of people who were direct fans of these movies, I don't think he gets enough recognition
No.
for like the impact he's had. And like like on a whole generation of people. Um because like he's even credited with like Titan AE and I believe Brave Little Toaster.
He is yeah, he's
I
both of
might be
those.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and his animation style was a little more edgier. It's a little more graphic than what
Mhm.
Disney would do. And I think I remember reading something about him. He was a Disney animator, and he kept on pushing his like stories and what he wanted to do, and Disney was like, no, this isn't Disney. You want to do this, you go out on your own. And I can't remember if he was fired, like fired slash let go, or
Mhm.
if he like resigned and like went to Fox and was like, hey, Disney passed up on this stuff. Well, what do you guys want to do? I believe that's what the story was. I could be wrong. I read it like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's so the animator's name's Don Bluth, the guy that I had mentioned earlier.
yeah.
And you're right, he started out at Walt Disney, and he did Rescuers, he did Pete's Dragon, like he did a lot of kind of those earlier stuff. I mean, he was even the animator for the Dragon Slayer video game, which like definitely makes sense based on like what I
Yeah.
see here. But it's really funny to me because I remembered this movie because you brought up the weird movies from your childhood. I sent this to my sisters because we watched this so much as a kid, and I sent them a picture and I said, hey. Yeah, I sent them this picture actually, the one down there, and sent them this and said, "Do you
Yeah.
guys remember this movie?" And they go, "No, we didn't watch this." And then I sent a picture of the flowers, and they both went, "Yep, we remember this movie now." So it's yeah. It how was the watch for you as an adult? Did it give you the same kind of feeling that Little Monsters did, where you're like, this is a kids movie?
Well, so like I said, I didn't know about this movie when I was a kid.
Okay,
I first saw it in like 2008 or
okay,
2009 when Kristen and I were dating. But watching it this time, like sitting down and actually watching it and like looking at the animation and like trying to feel my way through, okay, why is this in this category? Because I wouldn't even think of this movie being in this category. Now I do because I get it. Like the queen troll turns just a random bat into stone because
yeah,
it flew in front of her.
yeah,
Like just out of nowhere, just
just
stone
stone.
dead.
Yep.
Yeah. Um I could like there isn't anything in it that would be like, oh, that wouldn't fly now.
No,
Like
that's
there's
fair.
none of that in this movie. Um I would say the only thing that I could pinpoint
Hmm.
to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely like this would have that like this should have been nightmare fuel is the animation.
Yeah,
But other than that, it's just a good story.
yeah.
Like it's just a good kid story. I mean, what the and and Kristen and I did do the math on this.
Uh,
Um, you would have been the age of the older brother when this movie came out, I think.
I was 4 when the movie came out.
I'm going to say that this kid is either 5 or 6.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, he seems like he's about that age.
So I think you were the same age when you eventually saw this movie as the older brother.
And I basically acted like the older brother when I was a little kid. I wasn't a great guy. Like, I wasn't like fun to hang out with at parties at 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some kids aren't.
No.
That's fine.
The one
But
thing
yeah,
that,
like
go ahead.
that and the kid's dream, like they do it in a montage where like the troll takes the kids and they go on like a that flies through like their dreams, and the troll teaches the kid how to like realize his dreams to like have fun. And like you've got the like pirate ship that has like 95 cannons sticking out of it that just explodes out of nowhere. Like that definitely fits for like the whole like this should have been nightmare fuel thing for kids.
I was shocked at how little actually happens in this movie. Like, by the end of it, I mean, sure, it's like, you know, an hour 15, right? It's not a long movie. But by the end of it, really, it's just like he gets sent to Central Park, they run into each other, weird stuff happens, they turn the kid into a pig, which was kind of one of the nightmare fuel things for me. You had asked me to prepare a list of other movies that fit this category. I have that, and one of the things that you'll see in common with these movies is kids turn into thing freaks me out. And especially since, you're right, I probably did really, really, like, you know, like, identify with the son in this. I was like, well, I'll get turned into a pig troll thing. And, like, that scared me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. That and, like, it's easy though. Like there's like a portal thing that like the queen can follow up on him on. And well, one of the things I love is that like they banish him to Central Park by accident. They're supposed to be sending him just to New York City, like Manhattan, because the idea is to banish him somewhere where he can't like do what he wants to do. Like it's all concrete and steel.
Yep.
You know, like he can't do any of that. But they apparently they aren't aware of like, you know, like Central Park. And when I first told Kristen that like this was your movie, she was like, "Oh, I wonder if it's because of the scene that like made her sad for the main character in the
when
movie,
he got turned to stone."
Which is where no, it's way earlier than that. He gets banished to Central Park, and he's like, "Oh, this isn't that bad." And then, like, the random dog comes up and chases him, and then the squirrel chases him, and then he winds up in the restaurant from Ghostbusters 1, where the guy's, like, banging on the glass. Like, it's the same restaurant. It's that high-end Central Park restaurant thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then like a few other things, and then he's like all sad, like under the bridge, and going like, "I'm just going to stay here," and he's all upset. My wife was talking about how when she was a kid, that always made her sad for him. That like she always felt really bad for him, and at that part.
Maybe it's because I'm a cynical adult, but like 90s kids movies did that feeling really well. Like I, to this day, will not watch Fox and the Hound because the middle bit makes me sad.
Yeah.
Like I just, that was a common feeling. I don't know if your wife knows this, but one of my favorite things about this movie that I was doing I found when I was doing research on it is just how divided the internet is on this movie. Did you look up, or did your wife look up review scores of this anywhere? All right.
I don't think she ever will because she likes it too much.
What would you give it? Like, let's do like out of 5 stars. What would you give it?
Okay. I personally, for being a kids movie, I would give it like a 4.5. Yeah. But knowing the internet, I'm gonna say it's sitting at like a 2.5.
Okay, so I give it like a 3.5 to 4 stars. Right, that's where I give it. Okay. If you go to Amazon in the UK, sitting at a solid 4.4 stars. Totally makes sense. You go to IMDb, a respectable 5.3 out of 10. Not too bad.
Yeah.
You go to Rotten Tomatoes, 14% out of 100. Rotten Tomatoes, who hurt you? Why do you hate this movie so much? I thought it was
Maybe
so
it has
funny.
to do with the lead voice actor.
It could be. I mean, I thought he was really good though.
I thought so too. I don't know. I'm just trying to pull up a reason as to why it would be rated that low.
I mean, I read some of the reviews a little bit earlier, and I don't. I mean, it was just like someone's like a pointless movie, or someone like if you get the charitable people, they're like, oh, I guess the green message is good, but it's wrapped in a really dumb movie. Like, okay, fine. But, like, I don't know, like, what do you want, right? From a movie called A Troll in Central Park, what are you expecting out of this?
Well, the thing, I feel like that certain movies, like certain category movies, like kid movies, like
Yeah.
movies that are made for kids in like elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
okay? If the audience movie is supposed to be in elementary school, it should it shouldn't just say vote, it's like vote for it. It should be like, you know, it's like for kids.
Right.
Where would this, like rate? It's like take off your adult, critic hat for a second
Right.
and put on the hat of like, would you let your kid watch this if they wanted to watch a movie? And how much do you think a kid would enjoy it?
Yeah.
Like rate it off that. Not off of, like, oh, Troll in Central Park, it was a bad movie because, Jurassic Park did like this a lot better. And then you get, idiots out there, trying to put, Troll in Central Park or Pebble and the Penguin up against like Terminator 2 or Gone with the Wind. It's
Right.
like, come on.
Not the same kind of thing. Ugh.
Yeah.
I think that was all I had. I had one more question and I forgot what it was. Do you have anything else for Troll in Central Park?
Not really. I mean, it's a good kids movie.
Yeah.
It still holds up pretty well, just being a kids movie. One aspect of it that I definitely found funny because I listened to the parents a bit more, even though they're only in it for like, I don't know, 30 seconds of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Where like the dad has to leave and the dad makes up for it later.
Mm-hmm.
But like the dad has to go to work and like they're literally living in an apartment or like a condo that's just off of Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
And like the mom makes a comment of like, oh, so we got to give him his space. He works really hard so we can have the life that we have. And I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely heard that saying a lot when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But then like the mom was like, oh, I have an open house to do on Park Avenue. And I'm thinking to myself, like, holy cow, the mom could afford that place just on her own income, probably.
She's pulling in the
Like-
big bucks too. Yeah.
And, like the family in this is insanely rich. But
Yeah.
what I like about it is that they do enough to plant it for the adults that are, that like have to watch it. Be like, okay, well, at least the animators are being truthful in like the type of people that would have a condo just off of Central Park in New York in like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Like, that's at least solid grounding.
Well, it's not like, I mean,
But
it's like the cast of Friends,
if you're
right?
kid, like nothing, yeah, like nothing in the storyline has to do with any of that. Like the
No.
kids are just kids. Like they just, they definitely could have been poor kids just having a day in Central Park and wound up getting, sucked down a hole under a bridge.
Right. Right. But they needed that scene of the boat flying directly into their house, dropping off the...
Yeah.
Like, it couldn't have flown to Brooklyn to do that. It had to be, like, right by it.
Oh, it had to. But yeah, so did you remember what that last question was?
Yeah,
No.
you reminded me. I think the secret connector between these
Okay.
movies is that the dads are just awful. Even the dad in your movie, I was like, man, I don't like him as a parent at all. And like the one nice thing is he was like, hey, do you want to ride on my back before I announce you divorcing your mom? But like
Yeah.
other than that, he was like irredeemably gross And like this dad, like sure, at
Yeah.
the end he was like, "You want to play sport," but like the whole beginning part was awful.
Yeah, he was like, no, a typical dad for that time period.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah.
just makes sense. Like that's it was a typical dad for that time period. Um, but I, if I had to pick between the two, I would rather take the dad in Troll in Central Park
Yeah, me too.
than
Absolutely.
Marv from Home Alone.
Yeah, he was a little worse.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to get to the other
Okay.
part that I was excited about. I want to hear
Yeah.
your if you have other movies that fit this category, and I wonder if there's any
Okay.
crossover between
I
us.
okay, so I do. They're all animated, and they're all from that guy. Like
No
they're all from
way.
an animator.
Okay.
Yeah. So American Tail.
Yes,
The reason why is because the movie opens up with the kid being swept off a boat,
that's
and the family
right.
assuming that their son just drowned in the ocean,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then you have like him trying to like get back with his family, you know, like fighting through the slums of like New York City trying to like find his parents. Like that there there is a bunch of scenes in that movie that looking back here it's like how did this not give me nightmares? And then there's The Secret of Nim, which
Hmm.
is the one that I brought up before. That again has the harsh animation style. You've got the rats that run around and they're silhouettes and they're always stealing and carrying stuff and they're
Right.
scurrying really quickly. One of the characters literally gets squished under a cinder block.
Oh.
Um, you have Owl that is animated horrifyingly with like glowy eyes and it's living in a hole in this tree and there's like all over the place. So like it's got spider webs, like all over it, and it
Ew.
steps on a spider. That has got to be one of the nastiest, scariest looking animated spiders I've ever seen in any kids thing. And the owl just steps on it, and all the green guts and stuff like stick out of
Ugh.
like the toes and everything. And then you got We're Back, a Dinosaur Story, which the reason why that falls into this category is Mad Scientist and some of the scenes that he's in. Like,
Mhm.
it's really horrifying to a point. Like, it's actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
And then the one that made my wife lift her eyebrows up at me.
Okay.
Like, that one? And I'm like, no, if you really think about it.
Hmm.
The Brave Little Toaster.
Tell me why.
The movie opens with the AC unit giving himself a stress heart attack and dying.
Oh my god. Does it really?
Yeah. So the AC unit starts going off about something. I haven't seen it in a while, so I forget what he's actually yelling about. I think it's about yelling at the one of the other appliances for, hoping for like well that they call the boy like the little boy that want to like go live with again. They
Yeah.
call him Master. Like they call him that, and I'm
That's
like, eh.
weird.
Like it is weird. So, they that and the AC unit's like he's never coming back and all you do is complain and complain and it gets himself so worked up that he literally like shorts out in the window and then smokes because he literally just
Oh.
fried himself.
Oh, awful.
So that's how the movie opens.
Wow. Okay.
Um and then you've got like the storm that they have to go through. They wind up in the back of like a machinist repair guy,
Okay.
and they show the toaster looking at another toaster getting like shoved in a sea brace on a table and gets like its bottom taken off, and then the toaster is like sweating looking at it. So like you literally have the toaster looking at another toaster pretty much getting disemboweled in front of him,
Ew.
and you get his like panic
Ew.
reaction from it.
What?
Um,
I don't
and
remember that scene at all.
and then they finally make it to the city, and then they make it to the city, and then they deal with all of the like high end appliances that's in the apartment that like the family lives in now in the city, and the appliances are jerks, and there's a really cool song that they sing, but like it's like unsettling, like a
Okay.
bunch of unsettling scenes in the movie where like some of the appliances almost die. And I remember watching it a few years ago when I was an adult. I'm like, man, this is some real hardcore stuff that happens in this movie. Like, I remember this being one of those movies that my parents had no issue with me watching. And I'm watching it now going, man, that's hardcore,
Just
man.
three seconds in, heart attack.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, that's my list of, yeah.
That is a good number one. I had the same thing where you said Brave Little Toaster. I don't remember it being like that, but that is rough.
Yeah.
All right, I did a top 5. My first one, and I had alluded to this earlier, my first one's Pinocchio. And specifically, like, I get Pinocchio's like classic Disney, but it's the point where he goes to the island and literally for smoking and fighting and drinking, the boys turn into jackasses. And I think like the metaphor behind that and just the like again, it's the kids turning into something-ness of it all that super freaks me out. And like that part like was never okay for me to watch. Whenever I watched Pinocchio as a kid, I would watch the first bit and I would watch the last bit. Monstro was fine, but that part where he was turning into like donkeys and stuff, no thanks. My number.
Yeah. So.
Oh, go ahead.
Could I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
The 1996 Pinocchio would definitely fit in that list.
What is that? Was that the Jonathan Taylor Thomas one?
That was the Jonathan Taylor Thomas one. Just look it up. The Adventures of Pinocchio with Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and just look at some of the screenshots you get in Images.
Oh God. Ooh. Ryan, that looks horrific.
Now imagine that Pinocchio puppet walking down the street.
No. Even Jiminy Cricket looks just awful in this.
Yeah.
Ooh, I should have watched this then. Damn.
So yeah, so that movie is so poking so I completely agree with you on Pinocchio. I like that one as a pick.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
A tad worse.
My next up, my number 4 is Fern Gully, specifically for the montage of toxic love. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, that bit where the ooze is like going through the machinery and stuff. It's the bad guy. No thanks. Do not love. Do not love.
I love it when he's like eating the smog out of the tailpipe.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like the message. Disturbing as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
My next one's a weird one because I don't think it's meant to be. I think this might be a me thing, this next one. And it's not necessarily the movie itself, but my next one is The Hobbit by Rankin and Bass. Have you seen this one?
Okay.
It is like a 1970-something animated film. They have like musical numbers in the mid. Okay. Give it a look at some point. They have a lot of clips of it available on YouTube. Specifically, if you want, find the Gandalf scene. And I think what disturbs me the most about the movie, first off, was Gollum's like character model. Always like freaked me right out. But then the other thing was it was animated by Bakshi. And Bakshi was always known to do these like really weird, really off the wall animations. And all of this movie was essentially that. Plus it was rotoscoped. And there's something about rotoscoped weird animations. I mean, it wasn't as rotoscoped as his Lord of the Rings, which is good. But like it's yeah. That's the reaction to like all of it. And I remember watching this movie a lot as a kid and coming back to it as an adult. I'm like, why was I allowed to watch this? Yeah, it's something.
Oh, that frog is something else.
What did you find?
The frog is something else.
Oh, that's Gollum.
They're showing the Hobbit like talking to. Oh, that's Gollum.
That's Gollum.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird choice for them for Rankin and Bass, but I mean I love it. Yeah, the face you're making.
A weird moth dog vampire thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
With like hollowed out eyeballs.
Yeah, it's a trip, man. I
I almost feel like that fits into the whole like dark fantasy category, like The Last Unicorn and stuff like that from the 70s.
But that's
Like it was basically like kid-friendly versions of like heavy metal. Like you have like the
yeah.
heavy metal movie that came out in the
Yeah.
70s, and then they were like, hey, let's take this animation style and let's just make a bunch of kids movies.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. But the thing is, like, I've read The Hobbit book like a million times. It's not like that dark. Like, there's
Yeah.
like the line. I don't know if you ever see this. They do a lot of reels of this. Is literally when Bilbo meets Gandalf, he goes, "I'm Gandalf, and Gandalf is me." But in the animation, he's like, "I am Gandalf, and Gandalf is me," and he like lightning bolts, and I'm like, "Why did you go so hard on that line?" I like it. But that's my number 3. My number 2 is James and the Giant Peach. This one always gave me the ick as a kid. Always. And I think part of it is that it's a movie that's asking me to relate to a millipede. And also them eating the peach from the inside out just grossed me out.
I mean, to relate to a millipede.
Yeah, that's it. Don't do that.
But the millipede is one of the best characters of the whole movie.
If he had 2 arms, he'd be great. He has too many arms. Can't trust him.
Okay. So, my thing with that, this is where, and I know I tend to say this a lot on the podcast, and I'm sure people are like, you guys are only like 5 years old. It's not that big of a deal. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, like, 5 years apart when this movie came out, I need to look up the year real quick because this is exactly what I'm talking about when I come to like you and Alan being your guys' age compared to like me.
This came out in 96.
Came out in 96. Okay, I was 11 in 1996.
Okay.
5 years removed. You're 6 years old.
I am.
So when I saw James and the Giant Peach, I thought it was a really cool stop animation like fantasy movie. I love the characters, and I thought it was fun. And I was like, this is like, it's like I wasn't too old for it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't too young to where it creeped me out. You were at that
me
young
out.
age where it creeped you out.
Yep.
So, like I hear James and the Giant Peach, and it's like, it's a fun movie. It's silly, it's goofy. You've got the, you've got the blinded bug that can light up her butt up to, like light up the inside of the peach, and you got the millipede from Brooklyn,
The French spider.
and and the French spider, and it's all cool, and it's like fantasy, it's fantastic, and you got like the shark, and that's the metal shark submarine thing that's after him the whole time. But then you had a completely different experience with it. You were like, oh my god, get me away from the TV.
Exactly. This is creepy. Yeah. Oh no, and I need to watch it again as an adult to see if I like appreciate it more. But for me, it was the fact that you're asking me to relate to the millipede, and then the main character's just dead little black pinhole eyes. No thanks. And my number 1 is one that I'm like 99% sure I wasn't supposed to have watched as a kid, but I did watch as a kid. And it is, and let me make sure I get the year on this. I'm not sure if you've seen this. It is 1992's Cool World.
Oh, I love that movie.
Do you love that movie? Is it a kid's
Cool
movie?
World,
I wasn't supposed to see that, right, as a kid?
It is not.
I mean,
Cool World is not a kid's movie. It was made for young adults.
yeah.
It was one of the first like major hit. Well, I don't even know if it was a major hit. I know later on it turned into like a cult classic. But it was one of the first adult-centric animated type movies.
Okay.
Because like how you'll get kind of like, because remember how like Deep Impact and Armageddon came out at like the same time.
Yeah.
And you had a few other years where, like you had, like 2 movies that were basically the same premise, but they were like set in like different times, or like the storyline was
Dante's Peak and Volcano. Yeah.
Exactly. Like stuff, like stuff like that. You had the same thing with Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Cool World.
Well, I think that's why I saw this movie.
Came out in...
It was 92. Cool World came out
in 1992.
Yeah.
And Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Okay. out in 1988. So you're really
You're close.
spanning some time there. So I mean, it's not like the same year or anything, but like Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, even though there's a lot of adult humor in that, a lot of kids liked it. I know I liked it. I
Yeah.
was allowed to watch that movie from as, far back as I can remember. And then you had Cool World came out, and you're like, okay, this is not for kids.
Yeah.
This is not for kids.
I think what happened was they were like, well, he likes Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that lady on the cover looks roughly like Jessica Rabbit. Or what was her name? Was it Jessica Rabbit?
From
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and my guess is that my family was like, yeah, it's probably cool for Devin to watch. But, I mean, isn't the plot of the movie, like, as an adult, right, looking back at this movie, I went, whoa, that wasn't really for kids. That was weird. Isn't the plot essentially just like he's not allowed to have sex with that cartoon?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, that's kind of how it went.
I can tell you, I sure did not pick up on that when I was a kid. That was not my recollection of that, what that movie was. It was just Brad Pitt being cool in a way that, they weren't cool in Roger Rabbit. But yeah, that's my number one. And if it's not a kid's movie, that's fine. But man, is it just a strange pick for a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, when Jack Dibs was behind bars, he found escape by creating Cool World, a cartoon series featuring a vixen named Hollywood. The flesh proves weaker than ink, however, as Holly takes human form in Las Vegas. So there's definitely an adult premise of the movie. I haven't seen it in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like I don't mean to say this, putting you into this category, but I feel like it's safe to say that millennials that saw Cool World before they millennials that saw Cool World growing up may have grown up to turn out to be hentai fans.
All right, it's not me, by the way. Just putting that one out there. Not me, but I can understand the connection, knowing like what this movie was and watching. I think I watched it a couple years ago as an adult because I was like, "Oh, that movie when I was a kid. Let me turn that on." And I went, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my list. This was fun. I really like this. I really like these lists and this kind of topic. So let's make sure we do more of this kind of stuff in the future too. This is fun.
Yeah, and the next time we do something like this, I'll see if we can do it on a day that like all three of us can do it as well. And I'm sure I can think of like another category like this again.
Cool.
Because there's of them,
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Do you have anything else, Ryan, before we sign off?
I'm good. I know that this would technically be, if it was the three of us, this would have been like the week, like my pick for the week. I'm totally fine with this episode being that. And so then you would be the next one.
Okay.
To have. So if you don't have anything, that's fine. We'll discuss it in the group chat and we'll let everyone know what the movie's going to be later.
That was a level of pre-planning I was not prepared for. So yes, we will have to do that later.
I didn't tell you about it until now. I didn't tell you about
Perfect. We'll talk about it later. Tune in to our social networks to find out what we're doing next week. Speaking of social networks, if you like what you saw here and want to see more of stuff like this, you can find us on Facebook under You Have to Watch This Podcast. We're on Instagram under You Have to Watch This Pod. We have a TikTok account that we don't use but may use in the future. And if you want to hear more of these, we can be found really wherever you get your podcasts. And you can hear this and other really great Rum Runners Network podcasts by going to rumrunnersnetwork.com. And hearing other great podcasts on the network as well. But for You Have to Watch This Podcast, I'm Devin.
I am Ryan.
Man, it feels weird with just two of us. That's all we got for today. Thank you guys, and catch you next week.